The clearing of the temple may be the single most important event in Jesus' life. Almost all scholars now agree that this one act, Jesus coming into the temple and chasing away the money changers and the merchants and the animals, is what led to Jesus' crucifixion. And that's how Matthew, Mark, and Luke tell the story. In those Gospels, Jesus clears the temple right after his Palm Sunday ride into Jerusalem on a donkey. And his accusation is that the temple has been changed into a den of robbers. Now, den of robbers doesn't mean that the temple has become a hideaway for the first century version of Ocean's 11. It means the temple has become a tool for people like Barabbas, people who violently oppose the Roman Empire. But what really gets Jesus in trouble is that his actions are like a performance. When Jesus clears the temple, he's really condemning the whole temple system of his day. John's version of the temple cleansing shares this last trait with Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Jesus is clearly condemning a lot more than the selling of sheep and cattle and doves. But in almost every other way, John tells this story very differently from how Matthew, Mark, and Luke tell it. John puts the story at the very beginning of the gospel, in chapter 2, not at the end. Jesus makes a whip, a weapon, to drive out the animals, which does not happen in the other gospels. Jesus' reason for clearing out the money changers is not that they are robbers, but that they are turning the temple into a marketplace. Jesus calls the temple his Father's house, and Jesus makes his own body into a temple when he predicts his death and resurrection. These are all differences in John's account. Now, differences between how the Gospels tell the story of Jesus can unsettle us. It can make us feel like something is wrong. And for almost as long as there has been a Bible, Christians have tried to smooth out these differences by making the bits of all the Gospels fit into one easy story without any hitches. So recent movies, even those done by Christians trying to show the greatest story ever told, are just the latest example in a long line. But if God had wanted there to be a single, smooth, unified story about Jesus, then the Bible would only have one gospel. But the Bible has 4 gospels. Not 1, 4. And if the Bible has 4 gospels, which it does, then God must have a reason for us to listen to different ways to tell the story of his Son. Differences between the Gospels are God's way of challenging us to really pay attention to the details. Not so we can get rid of them, but so we can get an even better picture of who Jesus really is. The differences force us to wrestle with questions we might otherwise try to avoid. When Jesus confronts the temple system in John 2, he isn't interested in the Roman Empire, he's interested in money and ownership. After all, the presence of money changers and people to sell animals for sacrifice at the temple isn't so bad, at least at first glance. If you traveled to Jerusalem all the way from Galilee or even further, what are the odds that you would be able to bring a cow or a sheep with you? That's a long trip if you're walking. And if you bring the animal, you have to bring food for it, on top of whatever else you need for yourself. That's a pretty big burden. Even a dove would be a pain to carry all that way. And what are the chances it would survive? You might walk all that way and have the animal die in Bethany just before you get to Jerusalem. Then you arrive at the temple with no sacrifice to make. It's much easier just to bring a little money with you and buy the animal when you get to the temple, right? Why not? This is how these things started. And we just have to say, don't we, that money is, well, it's necessary for ministry. You want a church building? You'll need some money. You want it furnished? More money. Heating and electricity? More money still. Want to build a well in Uganda? Travel to Jessup to visit the imprisoned? Bake some cookies for the homebound? Money, money, money. You can't escape it. And hot on money's trail is always ownership. Before the money changers and the animal merchants, when you brought your sacrifice to the temple, maybe you thought you owned the animal and were giving it up to God. You were wrong, of course, but you might have thought it anyway. Now, you bring your money, you buy the animal, and you wonder, where does that money go? Other animals, sure, pockets of the merchants, yeah, but some, hopefully, into the temple. Do you own the temple now? Maybe just a sliver of it. A little piece of rock over there, maybe that's yours. Or you're the merchant or the money changer. Someone comes up to you with his coins to buy a sacrifice, you take his money, and you wonder, what would he do without me? What would any of these folks do if I weren't here? My money makes this whole thing possible. Do I own some of it too? Maybe that nice altar up there. Or maybe the cornerstone down there. Now maybe, if you have an ounce of conscience, you get a little uncomfortable with all this money. Am I really buying my way into the temple? Am I really selling access to the house of the Lord? Well, what else can you do? Without the money, the system will fall apart. And then Jesus arrives and invites you to leave. Okay, invite might be the wrong word. Drives you out, knocks over your tables full of money, scares off the animals you've been buying, and someone goes, what are you doing here? Don't you know who owns this? How dare you turn my Father's house into a marketplace? The system doesn't just fall apart, Jesus blows it up. And Jesus offers up a new temple. There's no more buying and selling sacrifices to get access to the new temple. Your money's no good here. You can't own it. Because the new temple is the once for all sacrifice at the same time. Because the temple is Jesus' very own body. Now, money doesn't quite go away with this story. It's throughout John's Gospel. In John 13, we find out that Judas kept the group purse for Jesus. And no one thought anything of it, not even Jesus. The money was being used to help the poor. What ends when Jesus clears the temple is not money, but money's authority to claim ownership of anything having to do with God. So we have to be careful about how we talk about money. And let's be frank, over the next few months here at Center, we're going to have to talk about money. The trustees have identified 5 major projects that require attention. We have a 150th anniversary coming up to celebrate. We'll start running our new air conditioner, hopefully, when the heat of the summer finally melts all this ice and snow. All of these things cost money. None of them buys Jesus. That's hard for us to accept in an age when money and ownership are almost inseparable. But it turns out it's also our salvation. Amen.